Students, today we will discuss the bones of the thoracic cage. Thoracic cage or thorax is formed by the sternum anteriorly. You can see this is the sternum bone and it lies anteriorly. 12 pairs of ribs forming the lateral bony cages. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So 12 pairs of ribs forming the lateral bony cages and the 12th thoracic vertebrae. So the vertebrae, 12th thoracic vertebrae lying at the back. So this is how the thoracic cage is formed, and the thoracic cage protects the vital organs in the thorax such as heart and lungs, and they assist with the breathing movements. So starting with the sternum, it is also known as the breast bone, and this is a kind of flat bone, and this can be felt just under the skin in the middle of the front of the chest. You can feel it yourself uh, just under the skin in the middle of the front of the chest. Now it has got three parts: the manubrium, which is the upper part, manubrium, which is the upper part, then the body, which is the middle part, and the void process is the lower part. Manubrium is the uppermost section and articulates with the clavicle at the sternoclavicular joints and with the first two pairs of the ribs. You can see here, this is the manubrium of the sternum shown in the green color, and it is articulating with the clavicle bone forming the sternoclavicular joint and with the first and second rib, part of second rib. The body or the middle piece, it gives attachment to the ribs through the costal cartilages. So these are the ribs and these are attached to the body of the sternum by costal cartilages. So some of the important parts of the landmarks on the manubrium is the jugular notch. So this is a depression in the mid of your chest at the upper end of the sternum. This is also known as jugular notch. Jugular notch, this one. Then there is clavicular notch, which is for the articulation with the clavicle. And then a sternal angle. If you put your finger in the jugular notch and go down, you can see you can feel a prominence. Now this is the sternal angle which is lying at the manubriosternal joint. Now this is the manubriosternal prominence of the manubriosternal joint, and the clinical significance of this manubriosternal joint or the sternal angle or the angle of Lewis is that the second rib gets attached here. So we can easily count the ribs below that. So second rib is attached to the prominence where we can feel the prominence. There is attached the second rib, and below will be the second intercostal space, and then the third rib, fourth rib. So that is how we calculate the intercostal spaces. The process is the tip of the bone, and it gives attachment to the diaphragm muscles of the anterior abdominal wall and the linea alba. So this is the tip of the bone, and it forms the joint with the sternum, which is known as the sternal xephosternal joint, and this usually get ossifies in the adult human. This this is a usually cartilaginous extension and it gets ossified in the adult human. Ribs. There are 12 pairs of ribs which forms the lateral walls of thoracic cage. The ribs are the elongated curved bones that articulate posteriorly with the vertebral column. So here you can see these are the curved bones and they are articulating with the vertebral column posteriorly. Anteriorly, the first seven pairs of the ribs articulate directly with the sternum and they are known as true ribs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So first seven ribs they are articulating directly with the sternum. They are known as true ribs. The next three pairs articulate through cartilage with the cartilage of the upper bones and they are known as false ribs. So 8, 9, 10 they are false ribs. They are attaching their self to the sternum by the cartilage which is getting attached to the cartilage of seventh rib. Now, the last two ribs, they are not attached interiorly and they are also known as the floating ribs. So 11th and 12th ribs are floating ribs. So what are the parts of ribs? Now, typical ribs, they include the rib third to ninth. Third to ninth rib is has got a has got same structure, so they are known as typical rib. And what are the features? They have got a body. So you can see here it is. They have got a body, a neck, and a head. A head, neck, and body, a tubercle, and interior extremity. So these are the parts of the or the structure of the typical rib. The interior extremity is concave and porous, allowing for attachment of the costal cartilage at the front of the thoracic cage. So here you can see the costal cartilage is attached to the interior extremity. The shaft of a typical rib is flat but long and it curves sharply near its posterior end, forming an angle known as the costal angle or the angle of the rib. The groove called the costal groove extends down the inferior portion of the rib's shaft, which allows for the passage of intercostal vessels and the nerves. Here you can see the rib. This is the anterior part and this is the posterior part and this one is the angle. And extending from the angle on the inferior surface is the costal groove in which lies the intercostal vessels. Each rib forms up to three joints with the vertebral column. The two of these joints are formed between the facets on the head of the ribs. So you can see here, these are the facets on the head of the ribs. There are two facets on the head of the ribs which form the joint with the vertebral column. And facets on the bodies of the two with these they form the joint with the facets on the bodies of the two vertebrae, the one above the rib and the one below. Now 10 of the ribs also form joints between the tubercle of the ribs and the transverse process of the lower vertebra. So tubercle of the ribs also form the joints with the transverse process of the lower vertebra. The surface of the rib is deeply grooved, providing a channel along which the intercostal nerves and vessels run. So you can see here This is the inferior surface of the rib and this is grooved. So here lies the intercostal vessels and nerves. Between each rib and the one below are the intercostal muscles, which are essential for breathing. So you can see here external intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles, and innermost intercostal muscles. They are lying between the two ribs and they are essential for the uh, breathing movements. Now, because of arrangement of the ribs and the quantity of cartilage present in the rib cage, it is flexible structure that can change its shape and size during the breathing. The first rib is firmly fixed to the sternum and to the first thoracic vertebra and does not move during inspiration. Because it is fixed point, when the intercostal muscles contract, they pull the entire rib cage upwards towards the first rib. Now, this is how the breathing movements, the diameter of the thorax increases and the air rushes in during the inspiration, and the diameter decreases and the air gushes out in the expiration. So these are the breathing movements which occur due to the ribs, sternum, and the intercostal muscles. Vertebral column. So vertebral column, it consists of 33 bones, that is 33 vertebrae, and they are divided into different regions: cervical region, thoracic region, lumbar region, sacral region, and coccygeal region. So in cervical region, first 1 to 7 separate vertebrae are present. In the thoracic region, 1 to 12. In the lumbar region, 1 to 5. But in the sacrum, 5 vertebrae are present, but they are fused. You can see here they are fused to form a single bone. And then the coccyx again 4 vertebrae, but they are fused. So we have the 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, that is the 19, and 5 lumbar, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and two separate bones, 25 and 26 bones in the vertebral column. Characteristics of typical vertebrae. Typical vertebra consists of a body and a vertebral arch. So you can see here, this is the body and this is the vertebral arch. The arch is further formed by the pedicles and the paired pedicles and paired lamina. So this is the pedicle and this is the lamina. Arising from each vertebral arch are the transverse process. So you can see here the transverse process, the spinous process, superior articular process, and the inferior articular process on the inferior surface. Now, vertebral foramen, which lies between the body and the vertebral arch, it is a foramen which provides passage for the spinal cord. Now, body is the broad and flattened part. You can see here, body is the broad and flattened part, largest part of the vertebra. When the vertebrae are stacked together in the vertebral column, it is the flattened surface of the body of each vertebra that articulates with the corresponding surface of the adjacent vertebra. So you can see here the flat surface is articulating with the flat surface of the corresponding adjacent vertebra. However, there is no direct bone to bone contact since between each pair of the bone is a tough pad of fibrocartilage known as the intervertebral disc. So this is the intervertebral disc present between the two bodies of the two adjacent vertebra. The bodies of the vertebrae lie to the front of the bone, vertebral column, increasing greatly in size towards the base of the spine, as the lower spine has to support much more weight than the upper regions. Now, the vertebral arch, this encloses a large vertebral foramen. So, you can see here large vertebral foramen. It lies behind the body and forms the posterior and lateral walls of the vertebral foramen. The lateral walls are formed from plates of bones called the pedicles, and the posterior wall. So these are the pedicles, and posterior part is formed by the laminae. Projecting from the regions where the pedicles meet the lamina is the lateral prominence called the transverse process. And where two lamellae meet at the back is a process called the spinous process. These are the bony prominences that can be felt through the skin along the length of the spine. The neural arch has four articular surfaces. Two articulates with the vertebra above and two with the vertebra below. So these are the articular surfaces. The vertebral foramina, it forms the vertebral canal that contains the spinal cord. So this is the vertebral foramen in which is lying the spinal cord. Now between the two adjacent vertebrae, you can see here on the sides of two adjacent vertebrae between the pedicles of the two bones lie a foramen which is known as intervertebral foramen, and spinal nerve from the spinal cord exits through these intervertebral foramen. Region specific vertebral characteristics. So, as I have told you, there are five regions: the cervical region, the thoracic region, the lumbar region, the sacral region, and the coccygeal region. So, first of all, we will do the cervical vertebrae. Uh, these are the smallest vertebrae. The transverse process have foramina through which the all this is the transverse process, foramen in the transverse process, and through which the vertebral artery passes upwards to the brain. The first two cervical vertebrae, that is the atlas and axis vertebra, are atypical. I will show you in the next slide. So the characteristic feature of the cervical vertebrae is the presence of foramen transversarium and bifid spinous process. Bifid spinous process. They are smaller in size and their bodies are also small. So atypical cervical vertebrae, these are the first cervical vertebra, second cervical vertebra, and C7 vertebrae. The first cervical vertebrae, the atlas, is the bone on which the skull rests. Below the atlas is the second cervical vertebrae, the axis vertebrae. The atlas is essentially a ring of bone with no distinct body. So you can see here it is a ring of bone with no distinct body or the spinous process. It possesses two flattened facets that articulates with the occipital bone. They are the condyloid joints. So these are the facets which articulates with the occipital bone, and they permit nodding movement of the head. Nodding means yes movement. So whenever you give gesture in the yes movement, and you move the head up and down. So this is the nodding movement, and this is done on the atlanto-occipital joint. Then comes the second vertebrae, cervical vertebrae, the axis vertebrae. It sits below the atlas and has a small body with a small superior projection called the odontoid process or dens. So this is a tooth-like process. That is why it is known as odontoid. This occupies part of the posterior foramen of the atlas above here and here, and is held securely within it by the transverse ligament. The head pivots, turns from side to side on this joint. So this is the movement of saying no. So when the head turns from side to side, this is occurring at the atlantoaxial joint. The seventh cervical vertebrae is also known as the vertebra prominens. It possesses a long spinous process terminating in a swollen tubercle known as tubercle of the spine, which is essentially felt at the back of the neck. So rest of the features are the same. Vertebrae. The 12 thoracic vertebrae are larger than the cervical vertebrae because this section of the vertebral column has to support more body weight. The bodies in the transverse process have facets for articulation with the ribs. So important point is the uh, presence of facets on the body. This is for articulation with the ribs. So 12 ribs are present in the region of the thorax and the thoracic vertebrae. They communicate, they form joint with the vertebral bodies and the ribs. So the characteristic feature of the thoracic vertebrae is the presence of costal facets on the bodies, and they are more in size as compared to the cervical vertebrae. No foramen transversarium here, and there is a spinous process, not bifid, long spinous process. Lumbar vertebra. Lumbar vertebra are largest of the vertebra because they have to support the weight of the body. They have substantial spinous process for attachment of muscles of the lower back. So you can see here, and they have got a massive body to support the weight, and the spinous process is well developed because the muscles are attached to it in the lower part of the thoracic uh, in the lower part of the vertebral column. So sacrum or the sacral vertebrae, this consists of five rudimentary vertebrae fused to form a triangular or wedge-shaped bone with concave interior surface. So this is triangular bone and the interior surface is concave. The upper part or base articulates with the fifth lumbar vertebrae. The upper part or base articulates with the fifth lumbar vertebrae, and on each side it articulates with the ilium of the hip bone to form the sacroiliac joint. And inferiorly it articulates with the coccyx. So three joints, it forms three joints, one joint with the fifth lumbar vertebrae, one joint, two joints with the adjacent hip bones, iliac part of the adjacent hip bones to form the sacroiliac joints, and one joint at the bottom with the coccyx bone. The interior edge of the base, the promontory, protrudes into the pelvic cavity. So this is the interior edge of the base, the promontory. It protrudes into the pelvic cavity. The vertebral foramen are present, and on each side of the bone there is a series of foramina for the passage of the nerves. So these are the sacral foramina for the passage of the nerves. So behind the body lies the central canal. Coccygeal vertebrae or coccyx, this consists of four terminal vertebrae fuse to form a small triangular bone. So four terminal vertebrae which fuse to form triangular bone, the broad base of which articulates with the tip of the sacrum. So here you can see. So this is the last part of the vertebral column. What are the general features of the vertebral column? Vertebral column forms when the vertebrae they are stacked together. So first of all, the intervertebral discs. The bodies of adjacent vertebra are separated by intervertebral disc. You can see these are the bodies of the vertebrae and they are separated by the intervertebral disc consisting of an outer rim of fibrocartilage known as annulus fibrosus. So this is the section of the this intervertebral disc. It has got two parts: the outer fibrocartilaginous part, which is known as annulus fibrosus, and a central core, soft core, which is known as nucleus pulposus. They are thinnest in the cervical region and becomes progressively thicker towards the lumbar region. As spinal loading increases, the posterior longitudinal ligament in the vertebral canal helps to keep them in place. They have a shock absorbing function, and the cartilaginous joints they form contribute to the flexibility of the vertebral column as a whole. So they have got two important functions, that is shock absorption and giving flexibility to the vertebral column. Ligaments of the vertebral column. These ligaments hold the vertebrae together and keep the intervertebral discs in position. Now, first is the longitudinal anterior, the two longitudinal ligament which extend the whole length of the vertebral column, the anterior longitudinal ligament and the posterior longitudinal ligament. So this is the anterior one and this is the posterior one. Anterior longitudinal and posterior longitudinal ligaments. The anterior longitudinal ligament extends the whole length of the column and lies in front of the vertebral bodies, while the posterior longitudinal ligament lies inside the vertebral canal and extends the whole length of the vertebral column in close contact with the posterior surface of the bodies of the bone. So this is the posterior uh, uh, longitudinal ligament. Then the ligamentum flavum, which connects the laminae of the adjacent vertebrae. Ligamentum flavum. This is the ligamentum flavum, which connects the adjacent laminae of the adjacent vertebrae. Then the supraspinous ligament and the interspinous ligament, which joins the interspinous ligament and the supraspinous ligament with the which join the two spines and the tips of the spines. Ligamentum transverse ligament, it maintains the odontoid process of the axis in the correct position in relation to the atlas. So you can see here, this is the atlas vertebrae and this is the transverse process. The dents of the or the odontoid process of the axis vertebra, it is kept in position with this ligament. Ligamentum nuchae is the it connects the spinous process and extends from the occiput to the sacrum. So you can see here the ligamentum nuchae. Curves of the vertebral column. When viewed from the side, the vertebral column presents four curves, two primary and two secondary. Now, the fetus in the uterus, it lies curled up so that the head and the knee are more or less touching. So you can see here, this is only one curve in the fetus and this position shows the primary curvature. The secondary curvatures they develop when the child is holding head and starts walking. So the first secondary curvature, it arises in the cervical region. Here you can see cervical region when the child can hold up his head. This is about 3 months. And the secondary lumbar curvature develops when the child stands upright. That is after 12 to 15 months. The thoracic and sacral primary curves, they are retained. So the thoracic and the sacral primary curves, they are retained. Of the vertebral column, the movements between the individual bones of the vertebral column are very limited. However, the movements of column as a whole are quite extensive, and this includes flexion, that is bending forward movement, and extension, bending backward movement. Lateral flexion, bending to the side. So you can see here lateral flexion, bending to the side, and the rotation movement. So the trunk can be rotated. Now there is more movement in the cervical and lumbar region than elsewhere in the vertebral column. Functions of the vertebral column, they include they support the head, that is the skull. They help maintaining balance in the upright position. Now they enclose and protect the spinal cord. They permit movements, that is the side forward movement, backward movement, sideways and rotatory movements. Now intervertebral disc present between the bodies of the vertebral column, they absorb shock during walking, and they serve as a point of attachment for the ribs, the pelvic girdle, and the muscles of the back and the upper limb. I hope you have understood the structure of the thoracic cage, the component, its components, that is the ribs, sternum, and the vertebral column. And then the vertebral column, each region of the vertebral column and their characteristic features. Thank you so much.